Right, hello and welcome to In Conversation With. My name is Colin MacDonald, and as always I'm joined by my lovely co-host Mr. Gavin Kelly.
How you doing, Colin?
In the hanging walls of Marconi once more, as
We're back again, Colin.
Fergal Darcy likes to say.
Yeah.
And we're with a man who I had the fortune of working with for 6 or 7 weeks every Tuesday. One of the most recognisable voices, I would say, on Irish radio, Mr. Matt Cooper.
How you doing?
How are you, Matt?
Very good.
Our interview
Hope you enjoyed your time with us.
Oh, I hated it every single minute.
Hope you learned something from it.
I know I did. It was valuable experience and hopefully not the last.
Colin tells me a lot, so.
Yeah. But Matt, is our interview something that you get asked for a lot? No?
I do interviews. I don't.
Yeah, you're the interviewer.
I'm the interviewer.
Speaking of, that's
very rarely the interviewer.
good place to start. So you've interviewed a lot of people. One that I listened to last night was Mary Crosby, Bing Crosby's daughter. A very interesting interview. Over the years, best, worst, most interesting, least interesting. Is there any ones that stand out for right or wrong
I
reasons?
can hardly remember what we did on the programme last week.
Okay, yeah.
Over the years, they all sort of blend and merge into each other to an extent. You just keep moving on, doing new things all the time. So I always know I should prepare myself for any time that I am asked what was my favourite interview or whatever and stuff. I actually couldn't tell you. But probably some of the most affecting ones were not with famous people, but with so-called ordinary people, real people who might have had really extraordinary stories to tell about their lives. So I can just pick one recently. She's become a national figure this year, Vicky Phelan.
Yes.
But her story and the way that she came to public prominence is actually extraordinary. As it happens, we met on the day that she went into court to fight the battle against the state and the drug manufacturers back last year in 2018. I just mentioned it on air. This looks dreadful. She actually got in contact with the programme and said, look, I'm willing to talk to you, explain more about it. And we brought her on the programme and just found her to be this absolutely compelling guest. And she's been on the programme very, very many times since. And every time I speak to her, I find out more about her. There's more depth to her than even I had thought. And she would be one of the most fascinating and inspirational people that we've interviewed on the programme in recent years. But you would have so many people and many people who've battled through it, particularly through our Dare to Care campaign that we would have had, our Shave or Die previously with the Irish Cancer Society. We'd have had lots of people on the programme who have either battled through cancer or if we had loved ones who've died of cancer, and some of their stories are absolutely inspirational, and they're one of the things that makes this job worthwhile doing.
Vicky Phelan, actually, just to point out that she was down I work in a bookshop at home in Waterford, and she was down doing a signing of her book. Lovely woman, absolutely brilliant.
She's extremely warm.
If you were to meet her down the street, you wouldn't, and not know of her, you wouldn't think twice about what kind of things she's been going through in the past 18-24 months. Right, so Matt, you're a busy man. It's fair to say. I know that from just even being in the office. You're kind of buzzing around Dublin all day, kind of attending different events. But what does a typical day kind of look like for you?
That's an interesting question. I mean, it depends. The radio schedule, it's demarcated because the radio schedule demands that I am on air from 4:30 to 7 o'clock, but there's an awful lot more work goes in before that. There would be a certain number of items earlier in the day that would have to be recorded because the people would not be available for broadcast at the time you want to put the item to air at. So you have to be available. I have to be available for that. In addition, there's an 11 o'clock editorial meeting in which we decide what the content for the programme of the day is going to be. Now that will change during the day as other things happen, as gaps may need to be filled if we don't have an idea for a particular time, or if we're in a situation whereby just a big story breaks, we would change the running order of the programme. So I have to be available either here or on the phone for people throughout the day and making the decisions as to what we're actually going to do. But in the middle of the day I would get out, I would hope to try and get to the gym. Like today I will be in doing a training session from 12:30 to 1:30. I would do that twice a week and I'll get other exercise in during the week as well.
Where is your local gym? Is it around here?
There's a place. I actually go to a personal trainer. It's my indulgence. But I make sure I've been going to him for the last 8-9 years now at this stage, Paul Byrne, and he just makes sure and he puts me through my paces and makes sure to vary it and get me into different things. So that's actually a very, very important part of actually feeling fresh enough to do the radio each day, and the radio is the core element of each day and built around that. Now 3 nights a week obviously I do television as well, at 11 o'clock at night. So what's involved in that is when I finish the radio show at 7 o'clock, I would go home, have a meal, do my reading for what we're going to do on television that night, head out there after 9:30 to arrive for 10 o'clock, meeting, make up, in, do the programme, and then come home. And that's when I probably have a bit of downtime. If you broadcast, there's a certain amount of adrenaline gets spent, so you're wide awake after broadcasting. So I would probably find it hard to get to sleep till about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's when I would tend to watch television or maybe read a book or whatever. Reading a book can be better for getting to sleep faster, or watch television. And then I tend to get up a little bit later because of that, the fact that I'm up so late. I tend not to get up till about 9 o'clock in the morning.
What's the morning routine? Tea, coffee?
Morning routine is very hard to get out of bed. I hate getting out of bed. It is true. But the dog has to be walked.
Things have to be done.
Things have to be done, before I come in here.
One thing that, again, I suppose is a privilege of me being in the office that I wanted to ask you about is the exercise ball.
Yeah.
For people that don't know, when Matt goes in to sit down and do the last word every evening, he, instead of a conventional chair, he sits on an exercise ball. What's the reasoning behind that?
I've been doing that for about 5 years. There was a few people started doing it around the office to support their back and whatever, and I got one and I loved it, and I've never stopped. Everyone else gave up theirs, but I'm the only one who's kept it going. Even now, as I sit in this chair, I'm starting to feel my back become a bit sore, my middle back becomes sore. It's something that I work through with exercise and whatever. But if I was to sit in a normal chair for the 2.5 hours of the radio program, I would be in a lot of pain afterwards from just being there. So what I tend to do is I sit on the exercise ball, and in every ad break I get up and I move around pretty fast for a minute or two just to actually get circulation going or whatever.
Virgin Media haven't okayed the exercise ball on set yet, no?
No, they haven't. And actually there was an attempt. Somebody had this idea of a kneeling chair, and somebody had one in the production of Virgin Media, and I brought it into the set, and it was absolutely brilliant. And Ivan, who also struggles with a very bad back, but his is way worse than mine, he wanted as well. But they looked weird from a side angle on the thing, because it looked like as if we were hovering, walking on air. So they vetoed it, but it was really pretty because, I just don't like sitting in chairs for long periods of time.
Okay, that's fair enough. So we'll kind of bring you back to the start, your origins. I mean, you have a similar background to us insofar as that you were in DCU. Was the journalism and broadcasting always in your mind growing up?
I did a commerce degree in UCC first, and then went and did what was then a postgraduate diploma in journalism at the NIHE Dublin before it was renamed as Dublin City University. I'm that old. But I had wanted, even back in primary school, apparently, I would have been writing sort of newspaper articles and things like that. I would have been an avid listener to radio, watching television news, reading newspapers.
Any particular DJs or hosts that you had an affinity for? Or?
I wouldn't have been DJs or hosts. I was listening to hard news.
Okay.
Now, I was listening to a lot of music and stuff as well. But, I was interested in the news and what was going on from probably maybe an unnaturally early age, but that was what I was into. And I got dissuaded from it. A career guidance teacher in my old school in Artmon in Cork asked me, did I have any relatives into paper? And the paper was the Cork Examiner at the time. And if you, he said, and I said no, and he said, well, you've no chance of getting in there, so give up on the idea of journalism. And I allowed myself, and I'm not sorry, because maybe having done a commerce degree first was quite useful, in that it gave me a background in understanding business and how power operates. So then when I went to DCU, I did my 1 year and the journalism course, and I found it a fantastic year, and it gave me exactly the grounding that I needed to be the reporter that I wanted to be.
So you were primarily a business journalist throughout the 90s, and a quite successful one, it has to be said, Business Journalist of the Year on 2 separate occasions. But you were obviously big into sport as a kid. Was sports journalism ever something that tempted you, or was it always?
I did a bit of sports when I was in DCU, or NIHE as it was then, during that year, to make money for myself. I used to do all the weekend sports markings. These are the things that are not as common now because of the cutbacks that there had been. But at that stage, what you would do is you would go into the group sports editor in the various newspapers in the middle of the week and get assigned at the weekend to cover various things. Could be small matches. It would be the stuff that the main sports people weren't going to, so it might be the least prominent League of Ireland game. You might be sent down to Bray or whatever, or you would be doing Leinster senior football, doing soccer pages for the pull-out magazines on a Tuesday, and you would get a whole list of things. So you might be doing cricket or athletics and various things, and getting the scores to put into it, and then phoning them in or whatever for the Sunday Independent or for Monday morning's Irish Independent. And you do not just the Independent. You would go to the press and you say, well, I'm already here for the Independent, so I'll do them for the Sunday press and the Irish press, or you do them for the Sunday Tribune. And that's how you can make a reasonable amount of money over the weekend, by going around doing all these things and working your way up, so that you might end up getting a sort of an 8-paragraph report on a match in the Sunday press or the Sunday Tribune or whatever. And that's what I was doing quite a lot of in my first year in Dublin, when I was in NIHE, and that's what I wanted to do, was do sports journalism. But then what happened was, when it came to the placements for work experience placements, there was a complete mess up in relation to, I was supposed to be going into the Independent, and the person in charge of it messed it up, and I was literally stuck for cash. Business and Finance magazine, which was at that stage the premier business publication, were looking for somebody with a business background to do journalism. I went there, and I was in there in place for 3 or 4 weeks, and they offered me a full-time job. So I was sort of left financially no option but to do it, and that's when I put, for that stage, my ambitions in sports journalism on hold.
Okay.
So, Matt, as a successful journalist, you moved then to radio more so. What was the thought process behind that?
Well, I'd spent, between 1988 was my first full-time job in journalism. I was with the Business Post when it launched in 1989, went to the Irish Independent as business editor at the start of 1993, and then went to the Sunday Tribune as editor in September 1996. So in 2002 there were certain frustrations I was experiencing with the job as editor of the Sunday Tribune, and not getting the investment I felt that was required to develop the newspaper. I had been doing a certain amount of broadcasting work. I had done a TV series with RT back in the early 1990s. I then had been here on Today FM with The Last Word. I'd been filling in on, Eamon Dunphy was doing The Last Word at the time, and I would occasionally fill in as his cover. So he quit the programme in late 2002, and Today FM approached me and asked me would I be interested in doing it full-time. So I had an enormous decision to make as to whether I wanted to continue editing a newspaper, which I loved editing and with great people who I loved working with, or take the gamble, the opportunity to go into broadcasting. And I remember at the time a friend of mine saying that if I didn't do it, I'd always end up regretting and wondering what it might have been if I hadn't done it. And it was actually, it was January 2003 I started. It was 17 years ago in November 2002 that I made the decision to move, and it was probably the best decision I could ever have made.
Did you experience any difficulties transitioning from, the written word to the spoken word?
Enormous.
Yeah?
Yeah, first 2 years did not go well at all, and I was probably a bit too verbose in introductions and questions and stuff, and but then managed to put a few things together, got a bit of help from some people, and then things improved and the audience figures climbed way back up again. They had fallen when I took over from Eamon, and a lot of people felt I'd made the wrong decision, that I wasn't good enough for it. But in fairness, Willie O'Reilly, who was the managing director here at the time, stuck by me and said it would come good, and by the end of the second year things did turn around significantly.
That's awesome.
So yeah, like you said, it's been a few years now that you've been working in radio, just a few. But since you've started working in radio full time to now, what have been kind of the biggest changes? I mean, there's a few obvious ones that I'm sure people will know that you're going to say anyways, but for you yourself, what have been some of the biggest changes in the radio industry in the past?
What do you think are the obvious ones?
Well, the emphasis on podcasting and not so much listening in live, I'd say, is probably a big thing now.
I wouldn't exaggerate that.
No?
Listening live is still the major part for the business, for the radio business.
Okay.
The vast majority of people still listen to radio as either on their radio set at home, in the kitchen, in the car, which is a major thing, or even if they're listening digitally by using their phone or whatever, they're listening live. Yeah, there's a younger generation who are listening to podcasts maybe and stuff, but if you look at the overall numbers, the podcast numbers are not enormous. Now, we're aware of the requirements to do podcasts, things like the Culture Club that you mentioned earlier with Barry Crosby. That's a specific item on the last word, which is designed like a podcast sitting within the program, so that if you don't get the opportunity to hear it live, it's easily available as a podcast. Certain elements of the program are put in special into podcasts afterwards, depending on what they are. But the listen live element via standard radio, even if delivered digitally, remains, and I think will continue to remain, the main thing for our radio business.
Yeah, one thing, that I thought of there is the instant feedback kind of thing. So obviously in 2003 there was no WhatsApp. Now at 0874 100 102 you get instant feedback on, you could say something and 5 seconds later somebody will drop a comment on
we
it.
were getting instant feedback back then.
Oh really?
Yeah, well, it was coming in different ways, in that then there used to be a phone operator who was literally taking phone calls and writing down messages and handing them in. But it wasn't long after 2003, before WhatsApp, there was text coming, So the text lines were open, and we would get hundreds, thousands of texts in the evening. I mean, I remember the night, or the evening after the infamous Thierry Henry handball goal for France against Ireland back in November 2009. We would have had thousands of texts in the following night complaining. And it's always been a way, there's always been that interaction. So WhatsApp is just a migration from the text thing that has been there for the last 15 years or so.
Okay. So what do you think then, Matt, has been the biggest changes due in the past 15 years, let's say, thanks to digitalisation of media and the internet? What has it done for radio?
Radio hasn't had anything like the change that other media has experienced. Yet the newspaper industry has been transformed, and not for the better, particularly since about 2007. I mean, the numbers of newsprint copies that are purchased have collapsed entirely, and migration to the net hasn't given the type of revenues required to properly finance newspapers. Television is going through its own difficult period at present as well, as more people are looking to streaming services as an alternative as they sit down in the evening, and as people are spending less time watching made digital terrestrial television, or terrestrial television, linear television as they call it. Radio is having some of those issues, but nowhere near the issues that other media have actually experienced. It's proved itself from generation to generation to be the most resilient. And if you look as well at the projections that even the advertising agencies have for the future, they seem to have a lot more faith in the ability of radio to continue to have large audiences than other media.
You're still a print journalist yourself.
Yeah.
So touching on the newspaper or the news industry, do you see it going even worse? Is there a salvation for print journalism, or are the numbers just going to keep on going?
No,
I mean, we've seen papers go by the wayside heavily in the past few years.
The delivery will be different. There is a big difference between news that you consume by the written word and what you hear. So I mean, there's a little more depth can be given in different some ways. In print, sometimes it allows you just shorter, snappier pieces. The challenge is the digital transition. Some papers are managing it very well. You have things like Financial Times has a wonderful mobile app which gives you the paper and gives you some up-to-date stuff during the day, and they charge for it, and I'm happy to pay for it because it's actually top quality material. The Irish Daily Mail has a fantastic app which allows you, for much cheaper than actually buying a physical printed copy of the newspaper, to get the reproduction on your phone every morning, and it's a fantastic app. Some of the other newspapers are doing the same as that. So I'd be confident in, given the importance of the written word, and given that people still, not everybody has to have everything visually or to listen to, I would still be confident that there is a space there for what would be traditionally known as newspapers, but maybe known just as something different in the future.
Okay. Matt, you're an active enough Twitter user, it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy Twitter?
Sometimes. It can be very enjoyable. You can meet lots of really good people there. You can find lots of really interesting ideas and comments. It can be very, very useful for actually coming up with ideas for the program and the rest of it. There are times when you find people who are just pretty nasty there, or who have pretty poorly formed opinions, which they seem to think are much stronger than they actually are. But there's one great thing about Twitter, and it's called the mute button. don't bother blocking people, just mute them. Let them fire off into the empty void.
They don't have the clue either.
And they don't know that you're not listening to them. It's great.
Do you find it hard not to get dragged down into an argument on Twitter with someone who...
Occasionally I do, but I try to avoid that.
It is tempting to kind of play them along.
I never would bother. I see it now.
It's sometimes tempting when people are just telling absolutely outrageous lies or making allegations against you, which are, if you made them in newsprint or somewhere else, you'd actually probably end up for defamation. And sometimes there's a temptation to just slap these stupid people down. But no, most of the time, I should just mute them, let it go.
Do you think if you weren't in the line of work that you are, that you'd still use it as much?
Probably not.
Yeah.
It's a work tool.
Yeah, a necessary evil.
Speaking of just kind of biting your tongue there on Twitter, as terms of being a journalist and on the Tonight Show and having to interview politicians and having to go through all the talk and all the things that these people say sometimes, basically what I'm asking is, do you find it hard to kind of keep basically just thank you
keep your own opinions in check while still
basically there's two reasons. One is that, I mean, as a professionally trained journalist, you're there to actually ask questions and to find out. I never make assumptions that I know more than anybody else. And in fact, the older I get, the more I realise how little I actually know. I mean, I do have the benefit of experience and a sort of a volume of information that I've accumulated over the years, but it's impossible to be on top of everything. I mean, there are so many things to know. So I never make assumptions that I actually know better than other people. So I'm not going to start ramming my opinions down anybody's throat, particularly in stuff that's relevant to their domestic lives. I might have opinions on things like Donald Trump and Boris Johnson and people like that, because they're not something that Irish people are going to vote upon or whatever and stuff like that. But overall, I think listening is one of the most important skills in what I do. And I would like to think that most of the time I'm good at actually listening, picking up and questioning people on what they say, and doing the job which I think journalists are supposed to do, which is holding to account, but not at the same time feeling that it's my job to tell people what to think. What I'm trying to do on behalf of the listener or a reader of something that I've written is assemble as much information as possible, distill it, test it, and then as truthfully and honestly as I can, put it in front of people for them to make up their own minds about subsequently.
It's fair to say now that you're probably one of the most established broadcasters in Ireland, and you have a very established journalism career as well. Is it hard to motivate yourself to continue to push more? Are you kind of happy where you are? Do you still set goals for yourself?
I'm always like being busy. I always like finding out about things.
Is there an avenue that you haven't explored that you'd like to explore before?
No. I mean, I've done other things such as make documentary movies. One documentary movie, the Dennis Rodman's Big Bang and Pyongyang, for example. I've made documentaries here in Ireland. I've written 5 books.
Yeah.
So most of the things that I've wanted to do in journalism, yes, I've done. If you was a box ticking exercise. But I look forward to next year, for example. I'm really looking forward to covering the general election, because that's very, very important to people, and I'm looking forward to doing the best coverage possible here on The Last Word on radio and on the TV show, so that I feel that by the time the election time comes, that people will feel that if they've been listening to the radio show or watching the TV show, that they've been better informed and that they're in a better place to make their own decisions and choices when it comes to vote. And then I look forward to, as well as doing the sort of the post-match analysis almost, by doing the election counts and stuff like that. There's a professional fun in doing that as well, and that bug never leaves.
So we want to touch on the Dennis Rodman North Korea, because Matt Cooper and Dennis Rodman go to North Korea sounds like somebody's put random names in a generator and just hit enter. How does one get approached to do that?
Well, what happened was, I was aware that an Irish company, it was Paddy Power, the bookmakers, were sponsoring Rodman's trip to North Korea, and the then chief executive of Paddy Power had a son playing in the same football team as one of my sons. So I was talking to him on Saturday morning at the side of
on the sidelines,
and I said, "What's this stuff you're announcing this week with Dennis Rodman?" And we were chatting about it, and then I went off to get us coffees. And as I'm walking down to get the coffees before the second match started, because other sons were playing another game, suddenly started thinking, well, that'd make a great documentary. So I went back to him and I gave him the coffee and I said, by the way, I said, what about getting a documentary made? And he said, well, actually, he said there's a British company already involved, but he said, look, why don't you come up, have a chat with them next week, whatever, and see if you can get involved as well. So I went and I met with the people, and my business partner in the small production company, I said, there's a book in this for you, maybe you should do a book. And I said, yeah, but I'd still love to do a documentary, let's try and get on board. So by the jinx of it, we talked our way into this work with this British documentary company to assist them in doing it, and I ended up eventually as the narrator on the documentary. But I went and I met Rodman in London when he was doing the initial pre-publicity. Got on bizarrely not quite well with him.
Yeah, what's Dennis Rodman like as a character?
Mercurial.
Yeah.
Also has a lot of issues, a lot of serious, I would say, mental health issues, and alcohol is a major problem for him. But on the first day he was okay, and we did an interview which we broadcast on The Last Word, and then everything fell into place after a lot of toing and froing, and then in early January, was it 2014, I headed off to North Korea just after New Year's Day with Rodman and we went and met them in China, we met them in Beijing, they flew in from the States, and I flew in with the English team, the documentary team, into Beijing. There we went to Pyongyang.
And I can't imagine you're probably one of few Irish people that's gotten to witness North Korea in person.
There's been a few. I mean, a few got in contact with me afterwards. Some who've gone in through charitable work, particularly with gold. But there's not that many. I'd say if there's 100 Irish people who've been to North Korea, that might be it. Maybe it's more. I don't know. But in various different guises during the years, there have been politicians in the past who went there. But in the Kim Jong-un era, there would have been a relatively small number who have actually gotten in. And it was interesting when they tried to put Potemkin Village type approach towards us. They were very carefully monitored what we were allowed to see, where we were able to go. We had to be accompanied at all times, and they were trying to show us the best side. And there was, for example, on the final day, they brought us this brand new not quite as good as the National Aquatic Centre, but a similar type of idea, without the 50-metre pool, but with a 25-metre pool and various other things. And they brought us there to show us all the happy North Koreans who were playing there and all the rest of it.
Are you sure they weren't Chinese actors?
Well, they were North Koreans.
Given their history in the 2010 World Cup.
But what actually happened was, my colleague Kieran had left a piece of equipment in, and when he went back for it, he managed to get back and run back inside. The place had been cleared out after he left. They had just been brought in for the few
performance
to perform. And then when everyone was been shipped off, bussed off, and then they were gone.
Is it a recommended thing on
holidays
to go to North Korea?
I would not recommend it. The actual team, most of the English production team went back to shoot some more stuff a few months later, just for pickups and things. And one of them, the cameraman, ran in the Pyongyang Marathon, which has this enormous, they run it into the football stadium, 80,000 people are there waiting to cheer in the runners as they come in. That's what you go and you cheer them in. And my wife is a marathon runner, and she said, when I go run the Pyongyang Marathon, I said, under no circumstances are you or I ever stepping foot inside North Korea, because apparently they did take great exception to my way of asking questions, and they were very suspicious as to what I was up to. And then when they saw the documentary, they actually objected strongly to me even the voice in the documentary.
Oh, really?
They really took against me for whatever reason, so no, I would not be setting foot in North Korea again.
Okay. We'll move to a few of the lighter questions.
At least one of the lighter questions.
Well, fair enough. Matt, you're a big Leeds fan.
Yeah.
Where did the love for Leeds come from? Was it just my father used to support?
No, my dad wasn't into football at all. I think it just happened. I think somebody, I remember actually, it was a neighbour when I was a small child, about 7 or 8, gave me one of these little pennant, or one of these little badges, metal badges. It was the little Leeds United badge. So I became hooked on Leeds from an early stage. So the first thing I can remember as a 6-year-old was winning the FA Cup final in 1972. and then I remember them losing against Sunderland in 73, the European Cup final in 75. Yeah, I was mad into. I used to listen to the matches. In those days, you could see very few games on television, so I used to listen to what was then BBC Radio 2 before it became 5 Live, and they used to do the big football nights. So I remember on sort of the radio having to manoeuvre the radio to actually try and get better sound quality on long wave, to listen to Leeds games in the European Cup in 75. So I'd have been just 9, but I remember them semi-final against Barcelona, and then the final against Bayern Munich was on the television. They lost in really controversial circumstances, but I was completely hooked at that stage.
I wonder what is going on downstairs.
Yeah,
Secret Santa.
Oh, I don't know if it's going to come through in the recording.
Spinner win, it probably will.
Yes, so those are your memories from Leeds years ago. But,
good old days, I suppose.
But talking about them in a more current context, they're flying high at the top of the championship. But obviously, it's not the first time they've been doing that.
They had a sickening draw there at the weekend against Cardiff, wasn't it?
Are you hopeful as a Leeds fan?
Never become hopeful because it's the hope that kills
you.
Like last year, they blew up last year in spectacular form when they should have gone up and should have been promoted. The next 4 games are crucial. I think really if they come through them with 8 or 10 points, I'll be really happy. But we'll see what happens because confidence with Leeds teams seems to evaporate very, very quickly.
Have you been to many games in recent years?
Not in ages. I just can't sort of justify sort of leaving the family to go to games and stuff. So I haven't been in Ellen Road, God knows.
You haven't indoctrinated any of the family into supporting Leeds?
No, actually, what actually happened is when my eldest daughter at one stage was big into Manchester United.
Okay, and, apologies for your
she
loss.
She used to say that, Dad, can we go to a game? So actually this goes back for her 11th birthday back in 2010.
Is it the FA Cup game between Leeds and Manchester
and
United?
And I was up the Stratford end.
Jermaine Beckford scored that day, didn't he?
Jermaine Beckford scored, and she was sort of looking at me, but at the same time she realised she was just turning 11 later that month, and she realised, Dad, I'm not going to say to anyone you're a Leeds fan. I actually regretted bringing her because the vitriol off the terraces were up the Stratford end, the Manchester United fans, and I just thought this is so far removed from what we enjoy when we go to sporting occasions in Ireland. It really left a bad taste in the mouth. She was quite shocked. And then afterwards we went back to the airport, to Manchester Airport. And what was lovely about that was when we were there, and I would get recognised, and even back then I was doing a lot of television back then, but a lot of people started coming over to me, Manchester United fans, who then said, God, that was great today, I'd love to see Leeds back in the Premier League, you deserve to win, better team, all this sort of stuff. And my eldest daughter turned around to me and she said, Dad, why are all these people so nice and yet everybody in the ground was so horrible? But I said, well, they're the Irish fans who are over and stuff. But it does make me think, like, she would come to matches with me, and various children would come to matches with me, Croke Park, Lansdowne Road, the RDS, various places. And that's one of the great things I love about going to sport in Ireland. You feel safe going into the ground, even if you're mixing with the opposite, the fans in the opposite teams, chatting away to them, having a bit of fun.
All Ireland final day, 82,000 people, and there's no home support, away support, or two sections. It's everyone in around each other. Yeah. We're getting towards the end, but one last question.
I wanted to. What's working with Ivan Yates like?
Big bollocks.
There's the tagline for this interview, anyways.
Ivan and myself get on actually really, really well working on television together, and it's I think surprisingly so. We work very comfortably in letting way to each other, giving each other a sort of equal time and space, following in each other's questions, moving it on with each other. We actually sit back and he sits back, or I tap him on the arm and say, you take over, or whatever, in a way that, and this might sound a bit odd, but we've actually managed to bury egos in a really surprising way.
That's essential for a working relationship.
Yeah, and we actually have managed to bury the egos rather than trying to be one-upsmanship on each other. Now, we might slag each other off occasionally or take occasional digs along the way, but it's nothing malicious and stuff. It's all for the benefit of the viewers or whatever. That said, I don't talk to him before 7 o'clock in the day. He's dead to me.
I was going to ask that. Do you see him downstairs at all?
No, we don't. In this building, we don't move between floors very much. So I would never see him beforehand. There's a conference call at 2:45 where we're just filled in by the production team on the Tonight Show on Virgin Media 1 as to who the guests are going to be and what the subjects are going to be. We might have a question or two as to what angles they want, but to be honest, it's not really until after 7 o'clock that we have any interaction when we meet each other outside. But it's very, very friendly, and even as we're recording this tonight now, the two of us are taking our entire production team out for a meal tonight and a few drinks. And,
fantastic.
And we do that each year, and it's all done on a very amicable basis.
Great.
Lovely.
I think we'll just finish off with one last question. Any advice from such a storied professional as yourself?
For young journalists and broadcasters?
Any young people looking to get into the media industry.
How do I get your job?
Always be curious, always be wanting to find out, listen, and never make assumptions that you know it all. In fact, what really is the case is you know very little, so just go and find out.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so Matt mentioned at the start of the show that in the Last Word Preps team they have an 11 o'clock meeting in the morning, which is coming up pretty soon. So we'll leave it there. Matt, thanks a million for being a guest.
Right.
This has been In Conversation with Matt Cooper. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.